Okay, back to Ottawa now as the premiers arrive for the meeting. Here is New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt. Let's listen.
Une espèce de dissonance là, dans le message.
On veut que le travail soit uni. Alors, je pense que tous les premiers ministres font ce qu'ils peuvent avec leurs contacts, avec leurs relations. Alors, c'est une bonne chose de mettre la pression, de développer les relations.
It's a good thing to put pressure
et on fait
on
le travail
and
pour le
develop
faire
the
de plus en
relationship.
plus de façon coordonnée.
Il y en a qui vont
And to
devoir faire
work
des
more and more
sacrifices.
coordinated way.
Actually, we're having a lot of conversations with each other about who's willing to do what, where we're willing to compromise, and those conversations have been really cordial and productive, and we've made progress. And I think that we're going to continue to do that today so that hopefully we can land on the final thing because the clock is ticking down and we only have a few days left.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, Premier Holt from New Brunswick saying that the premiers so far have had some really productive conversations, describing them as cordial among each other. As she said, the clock is ticking down. Here's Premier Ferry. Let's listen.
Your province being used should we come to a trade war with the United States? Where are you on oil and gas exports?
Well, I've said all along, we need to be very united and very strategic in how, and very proportional in how we respond to any tariffs from the United States. I see energy as Canada's queen in this game of chess. We don't need to expose our queen too early. The opposition does need to know that the queen exists, but they don't need to know what we're going to do with the queen. So let's see what the tariffs actually are first and have a proportional, but let me be very clear, a strong response to the United States. We need to, in no way, shape, or form, let the urgency of this economic and fiscal crisis jeopardize our national identity nor our national unity.
Thank you.
So let me address the Mar-a-Lago comment. We've said from the beginning we need to exercise our own geographic and political relationships in order to influence the political and personal sphere of influence of President Trump. So Ms. Smith thought that was a good idea in order to try to influence the decision makers around President Trump, and I'll let her speak to that herself. Again, I think it speaks to how I addressed the first question with respect to energy. The energy and the Canadian energy source to the United States is our queen in this game of chess, and we need to make sure that it is protected. And we can't, anyone who plays chess, you never take the queen out too early. Doesn't say that you'll never use the queen, but you can't expose her and take her out too early. So I would put it back on you. Do you sacrifice the queen on the first move? We're still talking about pawns here. We're not talking about queens. Thanks very much.
Okay, Premier Fury saying that there needs to be a proportional and strong response to whatever we hear from the U.S., namely President-elect Trump. Here is now the Premier of Quebec.
Mr. Trump menace dès la semaine prochaine de mettre en place des tarifs de 25% sur
25% tariffs on all Canadian products that are exported to the U.S. First, we need to understand or try to understand his objective, because if you look at, for example, aluminum, which is exported from Quebec to the U.S., there's no real replacement for Quebec's aluminum, which means that there would be an increase of 25% in aluminum prices for American customers. So the first losers would be American consumers. So obviously our first choice, we'll do everything we can by next week to make sure there's no tariffs. However, if there are tariffs next week, we want today to prepare various scenarios for response. We won't be walked over. Canada's going to react if the U.S. implement tariffs, and there are all different ways of putting in retorts, and that's what we'll discuss today. Mr. Legault? Inaudible for the interpreter.
Bon. Actuellement, on n'exclut rien.
Currently,
il y a plusieurs
we're
scénarios qui
excluding
sont
nothing.
envisagés,
So there are many
mais on
scenarios we're
n'exclut
considering,
rien,
but we are not
c'est
excluding
énorme
anything because
l'impact pourrait y
it's
avoir avec des
this
tarifs
impact
de
will be
25%.
enormous with these 25% tariffs. Yes, I was giving an example of aluminum
Pas une grosse différence.
where it won't make a big difference except that Americans will pay 25% more. But on other products, it could reduce American consumerism and reduce exports and therefore have an impact on Quebec jobs. So I'm here to defend jobs and defend Quebecers. We will take all the measures that are most appropriate. So I'm not against any of them. But Ms. Smith said, if you shut off the tap of electricity towards the U.S., it creates a national unity crisis. What do you say to this? I don't want to get into the details of discussions we'll have today. I'm here to defend the interests of Quebecers. And what I'm saying is that if there are 25% tariffs on all exports of Quebec products to the U.S., there will be a very serious negative impact on Quebec's economy, and we're ready to put into place some responses, and we're maintaining various scenarios. And what about maple products? And leadership against these threats? Obviously, this political situation is fairly special here with Mr. Trudeau's resignation. So what's important is for everyone to work together, the premiers of the provinces and territories, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the federal government. We must all work together. And the first choice is that there be no tariffs. Everybody has to agree on that. We have to do everything we can to avoid these tariffs.
Okay, I think that the first choice, and it's true for Alberta, for Ontario, for Quebec, for everybody, is to have no tariff. It should be the top priority. Then, if next week or whenever there are some tariffs that are put in place, then we have to prepare a retaliation plan. We may have many scenarios. We'll discuss that today. And of course, I don't think we should do that on the public place. It should be internal. Merci tout le monde. Merci.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Premier Legault saying Canada won't be walked over and they need to be prepared with a number of different scenarios if Trump follows through on his tariff threat. I heard someone call for Premier Moe, so we'll just wait and see if he goes to the microphone. The meeting with the Prime Minister about to start in a half an hour. Here's the Saskatchewan Premier, Mr. Moe. Let's listen.
And understand that Canadian energy is at risk, if he decides to levy tariffs to the tune of 25%. Does Trump need to know that? You may not ever do it, but does he need to know he's putting Canadian energy access at risk?
Well, I would say that we, not only Americans, but North Americans need to have access not only to our oil and gas products, but all of our energy products. If we are truly going to continue to build what we aspire to build as individuals, whether we live south of the 49th parallel or north of the 49th parallel, but we need to ensure that we are not having this tariff conversation for any length of a period of time so that we can build towards that continental manufacturing security, that continental energy security, and that continental food security. We have done I would say, a good job on the food security side to the point that we take it for granted. At times, we have had, I would say, unnecessary conversations about the path of pipelines, whether they be to Tidewater or whether they be to our U.S. partners and our allies in the U.S. In years gone by. And so we maybe haven't done as good a job at working on that integrated economy and that integrated opportunity that we have to provide energy security to all North Americans. And I'm talking about continental energy security. security, not U.S. or not Canadian exclusively. And the same with respect to manufacturing security and providing the goods that we need as individuals and as communities. All of these industries and many more are so very integrated across the border. And so this discussion that we're having today needs to be beyond any escalating this tariff discussion. It needs to look beyond escalating any of the divisions that we have in this nation or on this continent and getting back to what we do well. There are other nations that are looking at continental energy security in North America. There are other nations that are looking at food security as our continent of North America goes, and what the investment attraction environment is in North America when it comes to manufacturing and investing in all of those industries. And I would say that not all of them have our best interests in mind, and so we need to pay attention to it. And I think that can start and be part of that discussion today. But it's certainly we need to morph our discussion with President-elect Trump, very soon to be President Trump, to continuing to build on what has been successful in North America. And we've been successful when we focus on providing our own security, whether that be security in general, whether it be energy security, manufacturing security, or food security.
Not energy, not hydro, nothing should be taken off the table in terms of the response to the tariffs. How do you view that?
Well, we will, find out what we are dealing with on January the 20th or shortly thereafter. I would say, is there ever a time when we have escalated a broad-based tariff discussion to the point of taking nothing off the table or looking at taxing Canadian goods, goods that Canadians are producing and creating wealth not only for their family but for our community and more broadly for each of us through the various programs that we have across the nation. And so taxing Canadian produced goods in the form of export tariffs, it would be not only counterproductive to this entire conversation. We need to be talking about how we remove tariffs not only in North America but around the world, but having a conversation about increasing them, and increasing this conversation into more of a broad-based tariff war is not good for Canada. Canada does not do well in that environment. I would say North Americans will not do well. All Americans and Canadians are going to pay more for everything that we ultimately purchase. So that's the first reason why we should not be considering export tariffs or taxing things that Canadians are producing. The second is that it just isn't going to be conducive to bringing this conversation back to where it needs to be. North America, providing our perspective and our opportunity to work alongside our largest ally, our largest trading partner, the U.S., in providing that continental energy security, food security, manufacturing security. If we are not working towards that, you're counterproductive in the conversation.
Premier Moe, have you modeled out how many jobs will be lost in your province if Trump does go ahead with this tariffs?
We're having those meetings now directly with industry. Our Minister of Trade and Export Development is having those meetings actually today and throughout this week and over the course of the next number of days as to what the actual impact is. I think the initial impact that you can think is you look at what your exports are to the U.S. and times it by 0.25, and you'll find out what that is. For us, it's about $30 billion. We have diversified around the world, very much focused on diversifying our exports around the world. We've increased our export value drastically over the last 15 years, but we've also diversified it to the point that we send about 65% of our exports in Saskatchewan to the U.S. Our imports from the U.S. are about 80% of what we actually import into the province. And so we can't really import a lot more. And we're very much, I guess, from a percentage perspective, I would say a trade deficit with the U.S. But they are still and remain our largest trading partner and one of our greatest allies. And we have been on the phone with many policy decision makers associated with the incoming Trump administration over the last number of weeks, like my subnational counterparts that are attending the meeting today have been. And I think we should be thankful collectively for the extensive list of contacts that we have and the work that is happening there. At the end of the day, we are going to need an individual in the Prime Minister's chair that has a mandate equivalent to President Trump, and to sit down and bring this discussion to a head.
Equalization,
That's maybe associated, but certainly an important discussion, is I think when you see the increases that have happened in the equalization formula are starting to skew. The equalization formula there's to ensure that Canadians can be treated equally from a tax perspective, can be treated equally from the services that they access. When you look at some of the, the tax incentives that are happening today in equalization receiving provinces versus maybe some providing provinces that are unable to match that same tax space, there is, there is a conversation to be had. I would say that's not a political or a partisan conversation either. I would say that it should be a review that is done of the formula and done of the, currently where we are. I don't think anyone is opposed to being a part of ensuring that you can access healthcare services equally across Canada, regardless of where you might be. I don't think anyone is opposed to attempting to, have somewhat similar taxation systems across the nation, and no one is opposed to, being a Canadian first. However, I don't think anyone's opposed to looking and doing a review of a program over time to ensure that it's fair to all Canadians, those that are contributing and those that may be receiving.
Premier Donald Trump said the U.S. does not need anything from Canada. But, Saskatchewan uranium, for example, is incredibly important for American energy production. Have you or your officials gotten through to Donald Trump or tried to get through to him?
Yeah, I've said this a number of times, is, with President-elect Trump, we need to take what he says very, very seriously. However, not every opportunity do you have to take precisely what he says literally. We are in the midst, and likely going to be in the midst of, for a period of time, of, various negotiations with our largest ally and our largest trading partner. So when President-elect Trump, makes statements like that, I'm not going to comment on them. What I would comment on is I know that from my perspective, and quite likely what is fact, is the economy across the 49th parallel. Our North American economy is incredibly integrated. You see that, in Ontario and Quebec in the manufacturing sector. We see that and have very much engaged with our U.S. counterparts, most recently when the steel tariffs were on how many times a piece of steel actually crosses the border back and forth until it ultimately is made into a piece of pipe that goes in at Cushing's, Oklahoma, because we're not building enough pipelines in this nation, or ends up in car parts or ag equipment parts or mining parts. So it is absolutely an integrated economy, and to say that that we don't need to work with the Americans to add value to the products that we're purchasing and actually selling and providing to the world is an incorrect statement. And I would say the same is true for products that flow from the south to the north. It's an integrated economy. It's our greatest strength, and we need to work together as Canada's 13 premiers and our current outgoing Prime Minister and whoever will be coming in, and I commit to working with both in the best interests of Canadians on this entire discussion, which will morph over time, and so we're in that for the entirety of it. Thank you.